It's us. um, yeah, so this talk is on, and I'm presenting some research that we've done over the last couple of years. I started off at Cal State Long Beach and now at Oakwood University. And I have a colleague who recently graduated and earned her PhD, and she's been helping with some of the coding and the lit review, and that's Dr. Tara Jackson Whitehead. So yeah, advice from parents of college-educated Black women. Most of my sample, the people who responded to the survey that we did, they would be about this age, this type of fashion, as I remember my mama wearing and other folks when I was growing up. So those pictures kind of resonated. Right. So definitely acknowledgments, the creative universe, my mother, my sister, my wife, and daughters. I got a couple of pictures. This is our 20th wedding anniversary. We've been married for 24 years. My daughter this year became Miss Oakwood, so a big pageant and the whole nine. And my youngest daughter, the night before, she had a dance pageant, so it was a big weekend for us. So they always inspire me. Yeah, and I'll talk about my daughters a little bit more in relation to the research, because they'd be upset with me if I went too much on and on about their life. I mentioned Dr. Tara Jackson Whitehead, Lieutenant Yoda Uhura, thanks to Michelle Nichols. Always inspired me to think, like, who is this Black lady on this starship thinking? I'm a Trekkie, so yeah. Again, I mentioned Cal State Long Beach. They had the University Research Opportunity Partners Program at Cal State, which allowed me to have some undergraduate students help me get my initial recruitment sample and reach out. And Sierra Kent, who's a student at Oakwood University, she's helped out as well. So, around the time I started asking some of these questions, I did a study with Black men and asking similar kinds of questions about what parents did to get their sons into college. Around 2010, James Morton, who's in the picture here, he started looking at census data, and this idea became much more popular about, Black women going to graduate school at higher rates than just about any other population. And so, but I'm also, as I just mentioned before, a father of 2 daughters, so I really was interested, but this is also my friends and I were having conversations about, okay, what is this different trajectory? So my parents, my mother grew up in the segregated South, my father grew up in Indiana, dealing with a very different life, and then in the 80s, boom, things started happening very quickly. And so what's our expectations for how we raise our children? So that's been fascinating to me, those 2 fronts. So this is the third of a 3-part study I've been doing. The first was, I mentioned, taking a look at parents of college-educated African-American men. The second one was a slight diversion, but I thought it really fit in regards to asking Black parents about their experiences with school psychologists and mental health and what their perceptions are around that. Very similar to research methodologies. And then this one, I felt I needed my girls to be a little bit older. Both my girls are in college now, to give me some context for what I'm looking at, and also to have a better sense of, the literature and all these other pieces. So some of that was a bit selfish why I held back, but I felt I was almost too close to it, because we were pushing the 2 girls in high school and middle school and trying to get them through. But yeah.
I guess the statistic before, I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I wondered if it was, have you seen it broken out by the type of university? Is it that Black women are enrolling in 4-year institutions?
Yeah.
Or is it like 2-year or for-profit?
The research was specifically about graduate school.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So this is about graduate school?
Yeah. And going to graduate school at higher rates. So when they're saying Black women are the most educated, that's the conversation. Now for my study, I looked at if I asked parents if your daughter had made it at least past her 2nd year in college, right? And so that to me was just kind of an indicator of that we really pushed well as either as a family or my daughter's own attributes got her to that point, and she's doing better than most in regards to it. We know only 55% of people graduate from college, period. And in some spaces, black folks don't do as well, particularly if you're talking about predominantly white institutions, if you're talking, that whole issue with for-profit institutions that the Obama administration started addressing, or at HBCUs for various reasons, right? But making it to that sophomore year is a big deal. I know where I work at HBCU, I'm the Dean of Student Success, I'm in charge of retention, and we know that if our students make it past that sophomore year, they're good. We have to stay engaged with them though, academically and career-wise, but a lot of the hurdles that were really holding them back, kind of residuals from high school, really poor educational environments, low teacher expectations, that kind of things kind of fades away, but now they got to wrestle with like, what's my purpose and what's the next level? So, great question. And I kind of put it, in quotes in regards to, and this is one of the things I see when folks come to particularly my HBCU, we're a small Christian institution and a particular denomination, Seventh-day Adventist denomination. So everybody sees it as the Mecca at Oakwood University, that these folks are coming to this Mecca, right? And magical things are going to happen. I'm like, well, they came here with, learning disability, but you didn't want to talk about accommodations with a disability specialist. They may have had some other mental health issue, or they've struggled throughout school. So let's demystify some of that, right? And then some parents, they take a look and like, wow, how did your kid be able to just make that happen? That's hard work, and there's some specifics that go into that. And some of the other pieces with the research, there's some questions around, so you have a certain group that's going to graduate school. Who is that group, right? And is that reproducing a certain stage, and that reproduction is just cranking out pretty much the same type of folks, right? Who are already, third, fourth, or fifth generation college going, and are first generation college folks able to break into that group in the same way? Those are the kind of questions they had about a lot of that research. But that's prompted me like, man, I really need to do this thing. It kind of hit me like, who am I? I'm a cisgender man. This is not necessarily my thing. I've been doing mostly young men, but as a dad of 2 daughters, I said I still got to get in this and at least have the conversation. And it was a very powerful conversation. And these are most of my mentors and the students who I'm working with.
What's the enrollment at your school? It's a highly specialized school, HBCU.
Yeah,
Christian
yeah.
Center,
1,500. And we've ranged in between about 1,900 and 1,500. So we've been on a little decline. While some of the other HBCUs went up, but the Seventh-day Adventist institution, there's about 13 in North America, and all their enrollment has gone down. So we're wrestling with kind of, what's our reason, what's our purpose, how are we connecting with this generation? More and more young folks are less likely to see themselves as religious, and we're a very religious institution, although our religion and theology department numbers are going down. And interestingly enough, going back to my topic, there's more women coming to the religion and the theology department. Yeah. And we're still one of those denominations that's having this wild debate about whether or not women can be pastors. It's in North America, accepted. Outside of North America is where the conversation, but that's where most of our members are at, all around the world. So, yeah, so that's raging right now. I happen to have grown up in the only area and lived for the past 20 plus years in Southern California before I moved to Oakwood. I've been in Oakwood a year and a half, but our church conference has the only woman president who's ordained as a pastor.
in the world.
Yeah. That the Seventh-day Adventist Church recognizes fully.
Yeah.
yeah. And I've known her for a long time. She started off as the secretary for the conference and was, you know, real involved with our church. Even though she was like 2 hours away, she was really involved. So, yeah, interesting times, particularly for Black women at our institution. And my daughter is right in the mix of it as one of the leaders as Miss Oakwood. So yeah, and I'll talk about her a little bit more in relation to some of the results because she's going through a lot of these different pieces, so it's interesting to watch. So some of my ongoing work highlights, I try to highlight voices of Black parents and their engagement with schooling, right? What I've found as being a school psychologist for the first 10 years of my career and then being a college professor as well, there's not a lot of research that gives voice to what Black parents are going through. And even when it does, it's usually they're upset about the school system or they're not doing, it's kind of an abstraction of, well, these people aren't doing what they need to do. Their lack of parent involvement isn't there. And I like to have the parents speak on their own and just say what they want to say. Black girls overcome many obstacles in schools, and if you followed Morris and her book Push Out, and she details a lot of the issues that Black girls are dealing with. The National Center for Education Statistics also talks about some of these things like suspension rates growing for Black girls. So I wanted to learn more about parents' self-reported attributes of success in their efforts to raise their girls to women, right? And I'm an educational psychologist, so I look a lot at attribution theory as well. And so I'm curious as to how people view their own success or progress and what do they see as helps or hinders as well. And I'd really like to get into the anti-deficit model. You know, Sean Harper in higher ed took a look at African-American men in that way, like who are successful African-American men, and got, you know, a very large grant to take a look at African-American men all over the country and what they were doing as well. Asa Hilliard, who, you know, the ancestor who, you know, inspired many of us within ABPsi, but he's always had that look, what's right with Black people. And Ladson Billings, her research inspired me as a graduate student long time ago. I'm looking at that number there, 1994, but I went to graduate school in 95 at San Diego State, but I read her book, The Dream Keepers, right? And her research methodology of really asking, okay, who's getting it right when it comes to working with Black students? And what are their voices like? And she stayed, to me, she stayed true to, and really kind of broke ground in asking questions in that way. So there's been some others who's more specifically addressed women's college success in STEM field, and Hrabowski, Matten, Grief, and Green. But there hasn't been a lot when it comes to tying African-American women's success together in college. And definitely not a lot when it comes to talking to Black parents. My research partner, as I mentioned before, she recently finished her PhD, but she was saying, wow, there's almost nothing. I said, yeah, that's why I'm doing it. And I'm a qualitative researcher, so I like to be, I feel like I'm the first to start asking these questions, so I get excited about that part. Evans, Winters, and Love, and they've done some great research. There's even a later book out there, but I was really still stuck in there. They just had a book come out this year, but they do a lot of great work around qualitative research. But they had a discussion about Black feminism and womanism within the academy, and that helps me guide the discussion, and it will help me still continue to kind of break it down as we move towards publication. And I definitely have some recommendations as well. All right, and again, feel free to ask any questions as I go through. Yes?
Have you found that the quality of students are up to par when they're at the graduate level, or is it that? So I'm finding, in California now, so I'm finding that.
Which part of California?
I was in LA for 17 years, now I'm in Monterey.
Okay.
And I'm finding that a lot of the for-profit universities, as well as some of the community colleges, they're just passing the students.
Right.
And their quality of work is work because they've been passed along all this time.
Yeah.
So that come up at all in your research?
It does. It does. So some of the challenges that folks face, but I can even talk to it more personally in that I mentioned I went to graduate school, but I also went on a grant, African-centered school psychology grant. And although I'd gone, and I'm working at my alma mater now, but I'd gone to an HBCU, I'm a surfer kid from California, right? And so there were some parts that were able to kind of connect, and other parts I'm like, who are all these black people, these dashikis pouring water on plants and telling me I need to get my life right and how I need to present in front of people and I can't say and ah and I gotta have things in order. Who are these people? Why are they doing this? Right? And it was miseducation. I don't know if you heard that album earlier. And the main reason I was playing it because both my daughters were born to that album. Right? Right. So I was just connecting with my girls there as well. But that miseducation is real. You know, Carter G. Woodson, that whole piece talks about, you know, folks being exposed to different things. So some folks I find they're really well prepared, right, academically, but they're not necessarily prepared for it. Particularly in psychology, you got to do a practicum, you got to do an internship. So you go out there and you hit that wall. I know some brilliant folks, and I'm talking either colleagues or mentees who I've had, who they've just done amazing things, got great GRE scores, but then they hit a wall when it comes to dealing with their thesis committee, right? And a lot of it, some of it is personalities, some of it is they're not aware of the weight of the microaggressions that's been coming at them day after day, and then navigating those pieces, but that takes some deconstructing. And so I was very fortunate. I had some mentors who were intentional about deconstructing what's happening around me, and then how we can overcome each obstacle in making it culturally relevant. But not everybody gets that. So I mentioned, and I'm kind of bird walking here, but I mentioned I'm coming to ABPsi to my school psychology colleagues. Rather than, you know, help me experience my joy, they said, are they still, you know, rude to school psychologists? Are they still exclusionary? Right? On social media, you're working hard to do all that. I had to either hit the like button, move on, or, you know, maybe ask a question about ABPsi if you're not familiar, but one experience kind of set them off. So I think some of those dynamics are part of it, but then I also know we have to have an intentional program because those dynamics are out there. So the programs that I know that do well, they're very intentional. So San Diego State is one program that does really well in that they have grants. So finances are a huge, you know, factor that will limit a lot of people from being able to go on, and they're balancing different things. If we know the wealth gap is real, but a lot of times administrators don't realize that. So they're pushing for things that they think students should be able to do, but they're not thinking about funding that. Right? The intentional program at Prairie View A&M, and I call them kind of the Jedi Knights of ABPsi, because they get ready, they get their presentations prepared, they're sharp, they're outside practicing before they go in, they got note cards, they're prepping. Some young folks, and I know even some of my students kind of bristle at that. But if you're upfront with them about being intentional about this will help you to this next career level, that's important. The last piece I know that's going on, Oakwood, and there's about 24 other HBCUs that are part of a career prep grant, right? And with that career prep grant, they're linking and providing greater opportunities to interact with people in the field. So when the professor says, I need you to do X, Y, and Z to get a little sharper so you're prepared for your GRE, so you're prepared for graduate school, you're prepared for the rigor that you need, right? It's not coming from an abstract place. Right? So the intentionality, I think, is important, but there's kind of a gap right now in many different places. The last piece I'll say is I worked at a for-profit institution, and we had one full year where nobody hired our students, right? And the institution itself had done them a disservice. So in school psychology, you're supposed to do a 1,200-hour internship, but at that time in California, you can do an only 540-hour internship. And that could be okay. But nobody wanted to hire them because they were kind of half done. Right? And there were just some basic things they didn't know about full school year, about, and really within that school year, you get a sense of how assessments work, how working with the child from one school year to the next, developmentally, all these pieces they were just missing and they didn't realize it, but they were like, man, I paid my money. And they were being passed from one class to the next, exactly what you were talking about. So a mix of those factors. The other, and it's hit me now, the other piece is nobody reads Black literature. I've been to Ghana. I've been to several different southern states. I've been to HBCUs. I've even been to ABPsi sometimes, where I ask people, when was the last article you read about the given population we're talking about from the Journal of Black Psychology? Right? And I presented at CAS. I presented at some APA events. It's rare folks are digging deeper in that literature to use that as the basis for which they follow through with a program for students. And we're not always holding universities accountable for that as well. So there's got to be some triangulation. This is why I stay within ABPsi. I'm trying to start a chapter within Huntsville to do these kind of things, to structure more support. I think the student circle is probably the best structure. Now, implementing it, I talked about all those factors just a moment ago, all those other challenges outside and interpersonal and spiritual, political, all those other things that go on. But once you implement it, it can be very powerful. All right. Coming back to the demographics here, most of the folks who completed the survey were between 45 to 60 years old. It's about half and half, married and single. Most of them were African American, but I had a couple of folks who were West Indian, Caribbean, and one was African American and Samoan. Another person was white, raising an African American daughter. Fairly educated sample, and some of that I think has to do because I did a computer-based survey in social media. So they're most of them had either masters or more when it came to education. And their range, they had a wide range of employment, but mostly government work. Okay? Everything from the military to education. Very stable workforce in between 10 to 20 years for their jobs, most of them. Half of them attended weekly, some type of weekly church service or faith-based service. And most of them were in some type of professional organization. I saw a slight growth because I mentioned before I've been working with asking parents questions for a while, and one that almost nobody was answering was about being in a recreational group. But I've seen a slight increase in folks participating in recreational groups. For example, I'm in the Black Surfing Association, although I can't surf in Alabama anymore. But folks are joining more of those, and I think some of it has to do with social media and being able to connect people across. You may have one kind of niche thing you do and they're connecting more. But I know that's where kind of power conversations happen. If you look at the parent literature, for example, you're sitting at your kid's soccer game and you're having a conversation about, hey, where's your child going this summer? Well, they're doing a thing at the university for math, right? That conversation happens that quick. But if I'm not at that game, if I'm not involved in this recreational group, I don't have that conversation. So it was a mixed method study with some semi-structured interview questions. I mentioned before, it was on the internet, so I used Qualtrics, mostly completed by parents of African American women. The daughters had attended at least 2 years of college. There were 27 respondents representing 33 daughters. There was a convenience sample from churches, colleagues who work in K through 16, historically Black fraternity, sorority members, social media, blogs, word of mouth, from a core list of participants were utilized to reach the end of 27. All core participants were personal contacts of primary investigator, a lot of my Facebook friends or whatever. I'm on Facebook, like my daughter's on Snapchat and Instagram. Like my daughter's, I didn't know she was like an internet celebrity. I go to places, oh, we know your daughter. Like, really? Like, where did you see her? At church or hanging out? Like, no, she's just on Instagram. She's awesome. But I do Facebook about the same way. I don't know if I'm awesome, but I do Facebook. The respondents were mostly from California. That's where most of my social network is. But folks from the southern eastern parts of the United States also responded. So the main questions were, and I'm kind of condensing what I did for the survey as well as my broader research questions, but what were the top 3 one-sentence answers? And this is what I asked just to kind of get them prepped writing a bit. That parents of successful African American women provided for attributions of success in regarding to their parenting efforts. How would the parents characterize their daughter's academic progress and career trajectory? And some of them wrote very lengthy kind of responses to this. What constraints or helps occurred as their child matriculated to high school, then on to their career or college. And this is the part where I really wanted to get to what was the advice when I consider successful Black parents. I used to leave success in there, but a lot of people have questions about Black success. And I found my presentation getting caught up on the success conversation. So, but I'm interested in that advice, raising Black women to be career-oriented and or college-ready. So there were 9 respondents with 2 or more daughters out of the 20, at one point it was 24, now it's 27. So 33 daughters. 18 of 21 were progressing well, at least according to the parents, and had a positive career trajectory. 7 to 10 of the daughters had no path or had non-existent or career trajectory. And that was not desired, at least. So they, had a major and ended up in a different major or a different career other than the major that they had hoped to have. And most of the answers, though, even if they were kind of negative about the career trajectory, they tended to focus on the positive. Careers in academics indicated were marriage and family therapy, law school, speech and language pathologist, nonprofit work, entrepreneurial activities, and there are a few others, but and not every parent indicated exactly what it was, but some of them, I could tell they were really proud to write about their daughter and say, this is what my baby's doing, and I'm excited. Some others mentioned math-intensive courses as it relates to their preparation and graduate school readiness in general. So these broader themes, and particularly for their own daughters, they're thinking about their daughter and her success, right? Motivation was a large part of it. I'm connecting a lot of these themes to the literature about motivation, right? I mentioned attribution theory before and some of these other things, but they mentioned passion, creativity, goals, and problem solving. As I was thinking about my oldest daughter, she called me this week. She's in LA right now doing an internship at the University of Southern California, which is my alma mater for my doctorate. So she's walking around on the same campus, and she was real little when I was there. But she called me and she said, Dad, I just got back from working out. And you really helped me a lot with all the goals you gave me. Like, she called me, normally she'll text me, most of the kids text these days, but she called and she wanted me to know that the goals were the big thing that stuck with her. I don't know if it all sticks, but I used to, and because I'm, the school psychologist, I always got to have some type of goal, trend line, progress. So she played basketball for all 4 years, and she wasn't making her shots. So we got up every morning. I said, if you do 100 shots a day, you have to improve, right? Just some basics. And so she's she's almost, and I say she's ministering to me, because I was sitting on the couch and I should have gone to the gym, but she's ministered to me about, Dad, this is how I'm successful. I didn't realize it. Now that I'm away from Oakwood and being kind of in the midst of it, I'm at this other place, and I'm seeing I can compete with these other people, right? It's because of the goals, right? And that I had a little sand in my eye this morning, just thinking about all these pieces we're able to put within, but I don't know what's going to hit, right? You tell them you love them and all these other pieces, but most of the parents were focused on either their passion, what they saw within their daughter as their passion and creativity, wanted to nurture that, as well as their goals and ability to overcome problems with those goals. Yes?
I'm interested in, I mean, this is sort of a side question, but I'm interested in your perspective on parents that might be concerned that they're enrolling their children in too many extracurricular activities. Do you
Yeah.
think that that's a real concern? Like, are there actual negative outcomes from doing that? Do you expect?
I didn't see that. I didn't get that from this sample. I know I've been concerned with that, right? But I grew up in the 70s, and I think some of it was, and I was a free range kid. Like my mom would literally like, do not come back in my house. Get on your bike and leave. And the age I was, I think about it, like I'm 8 years old. Go, don't come back. When my kids left at 6 to ride on training wheels up the block where I could still see them, I was freaked out. When they were 12, riding to Target, I'm driving covertly, right?
That's a broader trend in our society.
Yeah. So I don't get the sense that the kids who are, even the kids who are in college right now, and this is my peer group, the parents who we've raised their kids, I don't think we've had that concern in regards to they're overstimulated. I think that was an outside concern, but I don't hear us talking about our kids were overly involved. In fact, we found just the opposite. So the next piece is extracurricular involvement, right? And support. Yeah.
When is too young, because when I think of parents who have put their kids in programs as early as 2 or 3, but then there's always been a lot of success stories.
Yeah, I think about access, right? Who has access to those programs and who doesn't, but also meaning. What do those programs mean, right? So, I just saw William Cross out there, Black Identity Development, right? And he looked a little flustered, but I was excited to see him, right? Because he had reading all this stuff for so long. But I wanted my kids, like his thing to start the Black Identity Development is a negative encounter. I always wanted my girls to have a positive encounter with Black identity. So their earliest memories are going to Kwanzaa, right? Earliest memories are being with their grandparents in an almost all Black environment. Although we were in California, they would go for their summers from the time when they were 3 years old and 5 years old to go spend in Alabama in a mostly Black environment at 2 HBCU campuses, Oakwood and Alabama A&M, right? So their understanding of who they are in the world is a positive experience. So if someone rolls up to me like, my experience was different. I found out I was Black because the neighbors came across the street and said the N-word to me, right? And like, we can't play anymore because, well, you're the N-word. Sorry, have a nice day, right? But that was more typical across this model. So if we're developing programs or activities that students are engaged in and our kids are engaged in, how we structure them, I think, is the most important piece, the intentionality. That's what I get from Amos Wilson's work. And he was really very far ahead when he's writing the developmental psychology of the Black child, but he structured it in solid research about development and other things. So that's kind of where I see it. But I think kids can definitely be overstimulated and overloaded, but they're overloaded due to lack of meaning and lack of connection. And so you can't really reinforce something that's just random or doesn't relate. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. And this third one, I hadn't anticipated, but this parent-daughter relationship dynamics, listening, and then I should have anticipated because I see my wife and my daughters doing this all the time. FaceTime, they're constantly on FaceTime. It's as if, like, I thought they were out of town. No, and they're constantly talking and connecting, right? And engaging their daughter's expression and encouragement. The respondents wrote about this, right? The other piece of involvement, I think that's important and that's come across through this is the third study now I've had, is literacy. And this has been consistent, that you have to have some level of engagement with books and then have conversations with your kids about that. So again, it's the type of involvement, right? I can get my kid in a bunch of things, but if it's not stimulating them for that next level, that's important. And the literacy is that base. The type of involvement is extremely important. One of the reasons why I still stay with the Seventh-day Adventist Church is they do Sabbath school, particularly for their kids. And everybody has the same lesson, which makes the kids highly literate. So you're going to church each week, have to have a memory verse, but usually your parents are reading to you before you're born. And they're doing the memory verse. So when you go to Cradle Roll, a Cradle Roll is from birth to 3 years old, right? And we're reading the same stories, right? We're seeing the same books. The books have gotten better because, you know, the ethnic composition of the books, but nonetheless, the literature, right? The literacy is a big piece. Parents in role modeling, this was the first question I saw, role modeling, but almost every section, some of the parents talked about the importance of being a role model. This was actually a different finding than I had with the young men when I did the study. And my sense is most of the respondents were mothers, and they were saying, I have this opportunity to be this role model, and also look for role models for my daughter. Being taught to appreciate and stand up for herself, and fight prejudice in particular, seeing other parents as role models, and I think making those connections. And these are the kind of things that we don't often, you know, talk about directly, but I know people do, where you'll get together with a group of folks where, you know, this is my squad that helps me parent my kid, or helps me just kind of stay afloat. So I trust these folks enough to leave my child at their house. Right, but they have these conversations. Yeah.
So this list looks similar to the list that you also found for sons, the difference between role model.
Yeah.
So.
And the other difference I think too is the parent-daughter relationship dynamics too. Those are two very different pieces in the sons. Yeah.
So in the sons, you didn't see that there wasn't much reporting that role models were. I don't understand.
Yeah, so for this group, role models were very directly involved with how the child developed. For the sons, and some of it may have been kind of the time in the conversation, because I did it maybe 3 to 5 years before, like around My Brother's Keeper. So a lot of people associate with boys, and the way it was coming across, like role models would be a mentor. But it didn't necessarily break down what they did. Just that if you see a black man, you're more likely to be a black man. A lot of this kind of mean talk, right, that they'll be around, but wasn't structured to, okay, so what does that black man do as a role model? This was more into what a role model does, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit more about, because the parents also saw this as their opportunity in raising their child, as being a role model to their child.
So am I hearing that basically with this, there was the women,
Yeah.
the girls, they
Yeah.
were basically looking at the parents as role models versus the men's study, there was just mentors, not necessarily family or parents.
That's right, that's right. And this is the parent self-report as well, right? And some of these folks are the same folks I have for the prior study. Because I mentioned before, these are my contacts, right? And it's, I didn't mention this earlier, but it's hard to kind of coalesce a group of folks who's going to consistently answer these questions. Because it was a commitment. It's like an hour long. Some folks did it in 15 minutes, I can tell. They whipped it out. But it could take an hour if you're really kind of agonizing over the answer to answer these questions. And some daughters achieved in spite of the circumstance as well. Okay. So some of the reasons for the progress, and they were kind of wide-ranging, and sometimes it seemed like they didn't quite, I could have asked a better question so they could get more precise, but I was interested in still what they gave me. And so some of the reasons for their child's progress were having milestones and plans, but they were allowed to develop differently or achieve success in their own way, also being professionally minded. So they had some more general statements that were made about their daughter's goal setting, planning, future orientation, and hard work accounted for their success. And that was about 7 of the respondents. Student athletics also, their love and passion for their career did as well. Being an example of others and seeing those examples as well. The marriage seemed to like they kind of veered off into some interesting things as it related to their child's academic progress. And some other things seem to be of interest to the parents, although not directly asked. Some of the challenges with academics in the career path. So breaks in school due to unstated obstacles or unexpected life events. So, and one parent used predators kind of as a metaphor for going it alone. Like if my daughter goes outside, I mentioned before following my daughter to Target, right? And the way a couple of parents wrote about their concern that once my daughter goes off to college, I don't know what's out there. There's some things that may come up that may just waylay them and I can't account for. And it's kind of this unknown that's out there. And the way one parent really described it was these predators. Stated obstacles where daughters needed to be more focused on their career, more decisive in academic major and career, dating, learning disabilities, and indecision, right? And I didn't even ask for some of these things yet. The next question I asked for more precision on what constrained their daughters and what helped their daughters. So the constraints that they saw, particularly for their academic progress making it to college, were low expectations. They specifically called out school counselors, but definitely some teachers as well. Divorce and family issues, medical and mental health, financial aid. One also mentioned pressure level to his sibling, choosing the wrong career. But the helps were in spite of their parents sometimes. And some of them were mentioning like, well, I had a divorce, I lost a job, we moved. In spite of, my daughter had this attribute that she's still able to keep going. And they helped themselves. The women helping women. This was a new one that I hadn't anticipated, but it was a strong one to me, right? Matriarchs, educated women that they were, and this again goes to the role model piece, like they were very intentional about, I'm going to bring my daughter around educated women so she can see them and interact with them. And also, or being at a single-sex school. Athletics, financial aid, were other helps. And then these last 3 are definitely consistent with the literature as well, with most of the literature around college-going success, period, but definitely for girls, right? If we think about Title IX and athletics and that type of thing. Some of the advice to parents. So, in going back to the involvement and the activities, a lot of the parents were really focused on making sure that you stay engaged. You may not be able to go to everything, you may not be able to participate in everything, but stay engaged, maintain the course, keep at it. Even if other people don't think what you're doing is making sense, you stay with it, right? Showing support and love, prayer, church, faith, those types of things. And this balance between being strict and supportive was extremely important in listening. I saw this as more flexibility. And when I did the first study with the young men, one of my biggest findings was the amount of flexibility that the parents talked about. I was expecting to hear a lot of like hard discipline kind of things. And I think sometimes retroactively in my mind, I think my parents were hard. They weren't. Now, it was the 70s and they believed in corporal punishment, right? But overall, they still had to be more flexible because I'm changing right in front of their eyes. I'm a very different type of kid. I go to the mall, I want to skateboard, right? Cable comes out, I want to watch this MTV stuff, right? We went from 3 channels to 100, right? There's a period of like 5 years and I was in that group. And so it was interesting to see this kind of difference, but this balancing between being strict and supportive, I think was interesting. Listening, again, this role model piece comes up. And in particular, be their hero, be their role model. That I hadn't seen before. That is very direct. Don't live through your child. Know their friends, of course. Know their report card. And so that was focused advice for the parents, but for as far as activities or things that their daughters can do, take advantage of as many activities and opportunities as you can. Going back to some of our earlier conversation, right? Get involved with as many things as you can. There didn't seem to be a cap on that. That I felt my kid was involved in too many things, so that hindered them. Right? The suggestion was do as much as you can. Encourage them, reward them, praise them. Again, the goals and persistence and choice, those things are coming back. Teach control and decision making. Think about the next 5 years for them, that future orientation. A couple were into travel. My sense is, and I hope this wealth gap gets taken care of because I know travel's huge. And the opportunity just to see something. I worked in Long Beach for 20 years. I knew kids who grew up in Long Beach had never been to the beach. And in Long Beach is laid out just straight with streets. You take one bus, it will take you directly to the beach, right? But a lot of kids just had never been outside the block. So that travel, I think, is important. One parent was really concerned, and a couple were, but one in particular, she went on about, avoiding relationships that are long term, particularly in the first start of your college career, which could lead to pregnancy. Financial savings, a 529 fund, and then develop your talent, right? One of the things I've told parents for a while is that we got all these kids involved in all these different things. Why not allow them to make money later on? So if your kid's going all them swimming lessons, lifeguard, job, right? And particularly a job in college that's not too heavily laden, right? But a great opportunity, but pay for itself, or at least pay it back. I did karate, right? My first job teaching was being a PE teacher, right? Parents invested a lot in me doing all that karate stuff. Crazy enough, I'm teaching karate at Oakwood University right now. Right? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, does the number of children make a difference?
I
I
don't.
know that there was a sibling.
Yeah. The ones who talked about, at least for this group, the ones who talked about siblings didn't quite make a difference, and they didn't do a lot of heavy comparisons in that regards. I mean, some of them said, well, one kind of, took a while to kind of figure it out, but the number, no, not in that regard.
Did anyone mention anything about avoidance of social media or screens?
No. Now, this is a slightly older group too. So if you think about it, the youngest would be my kid's age in college. So I said like 45 to 60, right? So my kids, they didn't necessarily grow up with the screens. Remember that DVD that you can kind of carry around, right? But we can just shut that down. Take that DVD out, right? And it's not constant access. I see kids right now, though, and that's definitely something for further study. You're giving me a piece to look at. But that's definitely something for further study. That kids right out of the womb, and I've seen some kids throw tantrums like, if I don't have my mom's phone and I can't look at my little thing, I'm losing it. But they have that constant connection, right? Yeah. Interesting dynamic, but I didn't see anything about that level of engagement. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, with the constant
Yeah.
Basically, they're constantly connected
Yeah.
to each other.
To each other. Yeah.
So I wonder
Yeah.
if there's a difference between that, ongoing need, that constant connection.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think that's a good way to use the technology, but you can also disconnect with it too. I think the other piece that this group is saying though, and I go back to the literacy piece, at some point you got to pick up a book, right? And you got to engage. So, and that's important for this group. So my sense is they're not spending a lot of time on social media in that way, right? But if they are, they're engaging and talking, listening, encouraging, and planning for what's next. My daughter is at, my oldest is at like this HBCU convening for all the royal courts, because she's Miss Oakwood. She's in New Orleans. My wife is there with her right now. She's like, I ain't gonna miss this. And she took my other daughter, right? And they hadn't really planned that directly, but they're constantly talking, and my wife just texted me like, yeah, we're gonna go. We're just gonna drive from Alabama to wherever, and we're gonna be there. But to me, that's a part of, I see this a lot more, and it's coming back to my own alma mater and seeing the parents' level of engagement. Like, parents call me about their kids' grades. Like, whoa. My parents put me on a plane and said, don't come back till you have a degree. We're only giving you this much money. They'll be calling us all the time because you have cost us too much. And it's just a different way to engage. I'm trying to do the same, but my daughter's like, no, Dad, you gotta help me with my classes. You work here. Right? And she's expecting that because she sees her other friends are connected in that way. So, I mean, I think there's pros and cons, but I go back to the intentionality about how you use the social media, how you structure it. I'll say this last before I get to some of these mistakes. My daughters, my parents did not allow me to listen to the radio until I was maybe 10 years old. And definitely not in their car. My dad had his 8-tracks and his tapes that he was listening to. You didn't touch that. I said, that didn't make any sense, because he didn't know what I was listening to. And he didn't want to hear it. I don't like what my daughters are listening to. But always listen to it. And I reserve the right to review lyrics. So when they said X, Y, and Z, is that what we're doing now? I just want to know. But we at least have the conversation and the dialogue, even about the lyrics. Let's say, all right, you got your phone out, look up those lyrics. And one sister or the other, depends on who liked the song more, we look up the lyrics. And we have a conversation about the lyrics. So Cardi B, she's really empowering women right now with what she's saying. Or maybe, I don't know, but let's have that conversation. I don't want to just leave that hanging. You're spending hours listening to her. I don't want to be outside of that. I want to be in the conversation. So,
before you go into the States,
sure.
Can you talk more about what you said earlier about flexibility and young men?
Yeah.
So you say that you think that it's helpful for
But that's what the parents were saying. And that was the advice that they were giving. Be flexible.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by flexibility for raising a young man?
I think it was just kind of, this conversation we had about toxic masculinity and various ranges of masculinity. I think that was the crux of it. I think that was the crux of it. So for my dad, right, if I think about the group, they're my peers, right? My dad felt he was doing big things by doing dishes. Now, he can't cook. I love him. And his mother couldn't cook either. Right? I love grandmama, but she could not cook, right? But he was very intentional with me about, your mom does all this around the house. You've got to contribute. Nobody in my family did this before. I'm going to teach you how to do this, right? And he said this way later, after I got a psychology degree and I could kind of process this. But he said, when you're a baby, you used to cry too much for me. I didn't know what to do. And your mom had to really kind of teach me how to be around a baby. He's a Vietnam War vet, he's a disciplined guy, no tears, right? He cries now. And some of it, I think, because he had a chance to kind of let his life stabilize. He was a foster kid, all these other pieces, he had to compartmentalize a lot. He still does a bit. But that kind of conversation about being more open to what your kid may be doing, what they may be participating in, right? I mentioned I'm a surfer kid, right? My parents were like, I don't know why you want to go to the beach with these white folks. They're crazy down there. The sharks, X-Y, like, they list it all out there. But now, I go anywhere with mom, my son surfs. All right, Mom. But I remember back in '85, you weren't down with the program, right? But some of it, and particularly if you've gone, and I'm one generation away from poverty. So, and that's many black families, if their child's going to college. So to see kind of that next level, you have to open up to some things, right? I'm the first in my family to earn a doctorate. So there was a point when both my parents earned their master's degree, but after several years of working as teachers and going back. So there's a point where you have to kind of see and help your child even see beyond themselves in a way that you haven't been able to do. So that's kind of the flexibility.
That was very helpful. I'll just share a little.
Sure.
My son, he's a different kind of kid.
Yeah.
Right now, he's very interested in everything having to do with Disney princesses. So
Yeah.
he knows all of their names, all of their stories, all of their
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah.
And I've been conflicted about whether or not this is something I should encourage or something I should discourage.
Yeah.
But it sounds like from what you're saying, I should be more open to his interests, right, and not necessarily
Yeah.
hamper them.
Yeah.
Just because they might be non-traditional.
Yeah, and I would even say balance that out too. So because there's things I think that are lost when we don't still provide an avenue to look at the full range of things. I was busy twisting my hair, back before twists were cool. I was twisting my hair, and then you see I don't have it. I was doing all kinds of things. Dyeing it blonde, all this other stuff. My dad's like, you're gonna want a job, or you're gonna want X, Y, and Z. And he would always kind of say, son, I don't want to say this to you to crush your spirit. I want you to know that, but I want you to know the range of options that happen. Sometimes your options shrink, sometimes they grow larger. So I want you to see, and I want you to try something each time, right? Try something different. So I'm glad you're interested in something I ain't never even heard of before, but I want you to see this full range. And then one of the things I always appreciated my dad did for me, he said, there's always somebody black who's tried something that you think you're the only one doing. You walk around here, you think you're the only black one. Let's look up something. Let's go to the encyclopedia. And this is before the internet. Let's go up to the encyclopedia. Let's go to the library. We're going to find that black person who did this thing that you think there's nobody else doing. Right? And now we got the internet. So we can make those ranges and maybe make those connections. Right? So that's that flexibility I'm looking for, at least from folks. Everything from, and it's really our identity too. Right? A large part of that development for young people is that identity, particularly from that age from 10 to 16. And you know the basic sight piece, but there's so much thrown at them now. We're going back to the social media. There's so much thrown at them now. How do they construct their identity with the deluge of information? How do they still make meaning of that identity? Yeah.
I know we started late. I'm just also mindful of more time because we do have somebody else.
Okay, how much time do we got?
We have until
9:50? Okay, all right. And we've been asking questions throughout, so we're good. Mistakes that parents make, right? And this is kind of, balancing again and going back to some of the advice that they were talking about, but strict versus freedom, right? And being that friend versus the parent, but finding a balance. Parents need to find that balance is really what I was getting from that. Comparison. Right? It could be a mistake. You're spending too much time comparing to other issues, or comparing to what the boys are doing, comparing to TV, categorization, report cards, comparing even my parenting to other parents, right? Lack of awareness of beauty and success and ethnicity and kind of how all these pieces go together. And this may be as close as I think we got to the social media piece, but talking about standards, having color-defined success, the struggle at this intersection of who I am growing up, young black woman, and this other piece of not telling them that they're beautiful. Right? Being non-affirming and kind of moving right into that. Fear tactics, right? Whipping, limited affirmation, especially from the father, right? Limited involvement, right? And these are all the mistakes that parents are talking about, but some of it, I see it a bit as a confession, and every once in a while the parents would say, I know this is my problem, right? But that's part of the reason why I asked them, and I almost asked them in this order too. Lack of exposure, going back to our involvement, right? So this group is saying that, again, get involved in as many activities as you can, expose them to as many activities as you can, but the mistake would be to not take them and travel, expose them to culture, not get them involved with STEM fields, not expose them to non-traditional majors, right? And not discussing dating or allowing their kid to spend too much time on dating and not really having a dialogue about what that means. I'm wrestling with this right now because both my daughters have a boyfriend. One, we've come to an agreement. The other one, we're going to have to talk when he gets back from the summer. And I just have some basics. I want him to understand about where we're at, where we're coming from. But I have an ongoing dialogue with my daughters about, this is the standard we talked about when you were young. And we've been consistently talking about, is this person that you're interested in meeting that standard, right? So I don't want you to change to meet, I want to keep that balance, right? But having that conversation is important. Putting limits on their daughters and their personality, right? Again, listening. You can see some of these themes repeating, right? In different areas. So age-inappropriate reactions and being aware of that behavior, denial of risk, right? And I talked a little bit before when I was talking about magic, but particularly when you go to college and like, oh, no, I got it. I had a committee meeting yesterday about students who've been suspended and they're writing their appeals. And they act like, oh, I'll just come back and everything will be fine. But honey, you got 2 semesters of all Fs. And you didn't explain kind of how that happened or how we can help or what can change or any of those pieces, right? And for those that struggle and for the family that may struggle as well, they may not be clear on what that risk is, right? Lower limited expectations as well, all right? So I asked this question in the study I did with the boys, but also with this study, and I didn't think I'd get a lot, but I continue to be impressed by what folks give me, right? And I just ask it very broadly, what do you think the greatest opportunity you have as a parent, right? And ethnic community development. This group was much more into, and I don't know if it's just the group and the time, but they were much more into this development, right? And he talked about, in some of these words, shoulders of progenitors, Black literature, and history access, developing culture and self-worth, resilience, having these amazing genes and telling their kids about, this resilience that they have. Character development is Black women, shaping the Black community through education, respect, loving Black men, preparing the next generation. Like these are deep themes that they were sharing with me. These were direct quotes. I didn't try to put too much on it. Right? The influence, right? To have an influence on their child's worldview, their friendships, their sense of sacrifice, and leadership skills, redefining their life, empower them, provide structure in the home, provide financial and other resources. Again, role model and lead. Right? So at least 5 of the questions, this term role model came out. It wasn't always the top, but it was consistently there. Right? And I didn't necessarily ask for it or expect it to be there. But for this group to be a role model, help them walk through womanhood, focus on it should be interest, not intersex, but interest as young Black women, incentivized to help other marginalized people, be honest with daughters about life choices and definitions of success and failure, lead in front and protect in the rear, and affect leadership skills, right? So really getting concrete about what they think about role modeling. Affirm, again, encourage, nurture, pick them up when they fall. And then this last piece about personal attribute development, self-worth, esteem, values, strength through struggle. Okay. So I'm just looking at my time here. We're doing good. So Dr. Evans Winters and Bettina Love. Venus Evans Winters is a school counselor. Bettina Love, I think she's a general educator. And they've done some great work editing some books on research, Black women in higher ed. And I'm just kind of picking some of the themes from some of these book chapters and some of the authors who were there. And seeing Black women in academia as womanists were committed to the survival and wholeness of males and females, the entire people, especially when navigating inhibited spaces. I would even say both the role models, but also ethnic community development, one of those themes that we were just talking about, those opportunities, right? Using endarkened feminist epistemologies to endarken or deepen our understanding of the experiences of Black women and girls. And really the way I kind of took the readings about the EFE was getting blacker than black. Taking time to luxuriate in blackness, but also, get a better sense of what that means for the rest of the world, right? And self-love, other than seeing other women as support, but really connecting in that way. The most salient, and the last one here, the most salient prevailing of the multiple identities of women of color is race, yet intersections of multiple marginalities should be considered as well, right? So promoting awareness of self to overcome the challenges in a realistic manner, and using and understanding both gender, race, any other identities, abilities, age, all these other pieces, and putting that together in a very strong way. So recommendations, I'm looking forward to a larger number of respondents. I'm hoping to write some grants for both the men and the women to get some larger group. And I'm hoping with the larger group, I get a broader range. Because right now, highly educated, particular age, I'd like to get a broader range for that. Some face-to-face interviews. The online platform is limited. And I really like the dynamic of being able to ask back and forth, but people feel less inhibited when they rather than typing. So, with both, a lot of folks have recommended that I talk with both the parents and the daughters to get at some of those dynamics, and I'd like to do a bit more of that. Broader surveys at women's events. I may need to go to Essence Festival next year. My wife and my daughter went, so I'm going to have to roll up on a few of those, some sorority events, women's ministries. A specific focus maybe on first generation folks as well, and ask some other questions around that. And then definitely some international context. This is mostly an American-driven piece. For parents, nurture their daughters' motivations with clear goals, be balanced and keep the course, keep them intentionally involved in structured, curricular, and extracurricular activities. So reading, writing, and math, of course, but also museum visits, plays, athletics, games, right? So I don't know if there's too much, right? But intentional. That's my main piece. Listen to and encourage your daughter as well as be a role model of leadership. And that's what came across real clear to me throughout this. As well as fight prejudice. And that was a big thing. Whether it's colorism, whether it's prejudice, sexism, whether it's racism, all these other pieces, fight it. Teach and appreciate love of self as a woman and a black person. Help them develop persistence and resilience to continue on past inevitable obstacles. If not, they will be hampered or stopped in college. Yeah. So, and that's going back to a lot of my thoughts about attribution theory and resilience, but they're saying it too, right? I'm bringing that in with my lens as ed psych, as a researcher, but the parents were saying that, which I was excited about. So, for educators, mental health providers, continue having high expectations. Always good stuff. Parents and daughters often want to go it alone, so encourage their own resilience. Women helping women, I think is important, and finding groups to embed them in. Sometimes, folks will come to me and say, hey, do you think I need to go to counseling? I'm like, I ask, who are the people that you trust in your life? And if they don't have someone, particularly a woman, to either mentor or who can look for them down the road, or a peer group of women who are supporting them, I encourage them to get involved with something that can help with that. Right? Matriarchs, aunties, church folk, it can just keep going, but definitely a strong women group. Do not underestimate the impact of family challenges as well as unspoken mental illness. And there's, what I like about this generation of young people right now, they're able to say, I got anxiety or depression. Now, they don't always go to a mental health provider, but they're willing to at least state it, right? So now that they've stated it, and then the challenge is getting the parents and the family to connect with that idea, how do we address it? I think that's a broader question. I know, particularly at HBCUs, a lot of other folks who are asking that, who we do student support services, we're asking those broader questions. Right? But one thing I found, I came to ABPsi last year, there was a study done that and I saw it in the journal too, HBCU students are more likely to refer their friends to a counselor than any other group. Yeah. And it kind of normalizes the conversation around mental health. Our queen, is it Miss Oakwood? Yeah, and we do call her the queen from time to time. But Miss Oakwood's platform last year was mental health. Our student government's platform was mental health. So the students are talking about mental health at HBCUs, but are the services there to meet that need? I don't know if we're there yet. Help young women make informed choices for an authentic career path, right? And this, when it came to some of the challenges that young women face, being consistent and authentic with who they are in that career path, but also the skill set that they needed to complete that career path, as we were talking about earlier, being ready for that next level, whether it's graduate school or whatever the particular career is. I'll give you an example. At Oakwood, we have a great nursing program, but we also know that if the folks in the nursing program can't read at a certain level, they're not going to make it, because you take a lot of information, and that's the rest of your career. You're going to be taking new information as research studies come out. So they have to be accepted into the program. Even though they're accepted to university, they have to read at a certain level to be accepted into the program. They have to pass this Nelson Denny reading test to get there. So, as an ABPsi, I think about all the psychometric issues with bias and all these other pieces, but we know, bottom line, if they can't read at this level, they're not going to make it through most of the nursing programs. And that's almost 30 years of research they've been doing, specifically on nursing programs, with that same tool. Help young women make informed choices for an authentic career path. Athletics can be helpful. And this group didn't talk a lot about athletics, but when they did, they were very emphatic about it. And I know both my daughters played. Once I saw that Title IX research, more likely to go to college, less likely to have a child before they go to college, right? I was all in. I said, you're going to do something. My oldest did basketball, my youngest did cheerleading. Although my youngest is taller and did really well. She's a great forward, but she wanted to cheer and she's amazing at it. Be on the lookout for financial aid and a range of those things. I'm finding right now there's so much info on financial aid, there's not a coherent consistently. Everybody just thinks somebody's going to make that happen. I think for those educators who really want to support Black women, you have to have a plan and a program to support them financially. Also have resources for tutoring, student programming, and counseling at the school available. If we're talking middle and high school, definitely. Also say college, or if you're doing an adult ed type program, have all those pieces available. Because if you're raising your consciousness, you need to be able to read. You need new vocabulary. Black Panther's basic. In order to get the jacket and the beret, you had to read for a year. A whole year. You had to go to study groups. right? But that core piece of increasing your literacy, I think is huge. New vocabulary is the way I do it. Most of the courses I teach, I start with a whole piece on vocabulary. When the students get the vocabulary, then we're able to have a whole nother conversation now. And they come back at me. One of the ones my daughter comes back at me with is my youngest. Started using the term disingenuous. And she's like, Dad, and at first she was using it all wrong, but she's got it honed now. Oh yeah, Dad, I think you're being disingenuous about you and your going to the gym. Yeah. And then for all who love Black women, develop the community, encourage the girls as they grow to be women, encourage their leadership skills and their influence, right? Affirm and promote their resilience. So, yeah. As I mentioned, and I started off with, Lauryn Hill, Miseducation, a lot of potential with Lauryn Hill, and we can get into all those other pieces.
She fell in love.
Possibly, right? I think that's a powerful story. A lot of those kind of stories you read, about Africa, all these different things, they didn't always work out because American stories, the hero always comes and saves the day. They don't always work out that way, right? But the resilience and the staying power, I think is the important thing, and I think for young women, they're ruling right now. So I'm excited to see my daughter. I'm excited to see the influence of Michelle Obama. Think about young women who are in college right now. They saw Sasha and Malia with their parents, right? I sat there with my kids in the bed, and it was later at night when they were in their little pajamas, and and I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. It was almost like Jesse Jackson with with the tears and such. And it wasn't really so much that we got a new president because presidents come and go for sure, as we've seen, right? But that image of that family and that staying power, got a chance to imagine some greater possibilities, right? And I'd like for us to continue to be able to do that, to make those connections outside of this. I'm recording the video, so I'm going to share with folks as I can. Any questions, any thoughts, any feedback? I appreciate it. We're almost at time. I think we got 5 minutes. 3.
One question that just popped into mind a lot, I know we alluded to it a few times, but the women who succeed outside of family support. I'm thinking of myself, for instance. My mom was not educated at all.
Yeah.
It's not until later in my life that I realized she finally admitted that she never went to school.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really do anything, so she was never at the events, she was never at anything, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do it this far. Because
Yeah.
think of the bigger structure. Not everybody has what a family or 2 household family.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you have a chance to redefine family to some degree?
I did. There's a lot of external support.
Yeah.
There's a lot of definitely people who believed in me that fostered that belief in myself.
Yeah.
And my own sense of competitiveness, because there was always a comparison of your cousin is doing so well. Why don't you do like she does? And well, I'm gonna show you I'm gonna do like she did. So that was a healthy sense of competition.
Yeah. But I think within that, going to some of these pieces, definitely being goal-driven, right? But I do think there is some piece to having a sense of there's more for me and nurturing that. I think anyone who finds himself in that situation, I mentioned my father, he was in foster care, he was one of 10 kids, he's the only one to go to college and finish and earn a master's degree. But interesting thing, a school psychologist worked with him and found out he had like 140 plus IQ. He started walking around with a pocket protector, carrying a briefcase, and put on glasses. A kind of internal attribute in his own identity development, but I think if you find, if you're working with young folks who don't have those pieces, and I've done that before, nurturing that gift, whatever they have, and encouraging them to continue to kind of reach towards that, developing their own resilience. I also think decision making, because a lot of times I have to make those decisions on their own. I have a young man who I mentored, and his mother was in and out of jail. He was in special ed when I met him. He just finished his doctorate this last year, same doctoral program I went to at the University of Southern California. And my mentoring of him was very basic. Can you solve problems? Because you're likely going to be on your own. I could give you as much money as I could, but that can only go so far, and I work for the government, but it's only going so far, right? How can you solve those problems? What's next, right? And for some folks, they kind of go in competition, but I think that self-awareness, goal development, that piece can help us push forward. Great observation. My mother and my father were similar. My mother, her mom died when she was 14, but she's a mathematical genius. Right, and my grandfather saw this, sent her to Prairie View A&M for the summers to go and hone that gift. Didn't quite know what would happen up there. He hadn't been to college. He didn't know anything about these college people, but that stayed with my mom. And next generation, she's like, you're going to HBCU. I don't know what's going on, but you're gonna go. And from her experience, but also her and my grandfather, but you know, her father really seeing that we've got to nurture this. She's the youngest of 7 kids. Right? Please come in. We're done. All right. And any other thoughts or questions? Thank you for sharing the moment this morning.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really good.
All right.
Really good. Engaged, interested.
Cool.
It's an important discussion. Yeah.
All right. For those following at home on the video, thanks for staying with us so long. If you need to get in contact with me, I'm at bgamble@oakwood.edu.